Someone very tall has been standing here. An old analogy says this, that the blessings of the higher Christian life are like objects on display in a shop window. That we can see them clearly, but not always reach them. If we were told to stretch out our hands and grab them, we would reply, I cannot. For there is thick plate glass between us and them. Even so, we people of faith can clearly see the blessed promises of Christ, promises of peace and rest and joy and hope, even in struggle, promises of communion with God and impact and purpose in life. Yet we often feel like there's something between us and God's gifts. And the truth of what robs us of knowing the fullness of God's gifts, the truth of what robs us is something we don't always often want to talk about, and yet it's the very conversation that will crumble the barriers. Andrew Murray says it this way, the promises made to faith are so free and sure, the invitations and encouragement so strong, the mighty power of God on which it may count so near and free, that the something that hinders faith, that hinders the blessings, is ours. What lies between us and the blessings God wants to pour out is our pride. And that has always been true. It's part of our human story. It's part of our human struggle. It's part of our human history. It was pride in the Garden of Eden that made Adam and Eve take what wasn't theirs as if it was. It was pride that made the Israelites forget the gifts and ways of God and lead themselves to their own downfall. It was the pride of Judas that governed his own greed. And it was pride that took his own life before Christ could offer the grace he assuredly would. Just as true about pride is the truth about humility. The humility to admit our need for God. The God who invites our flaws and invites us to depend on him each and every saving moment in the Israelites' story comes down to that moment where they admit their wrong and admit their need. Right before God who's been waiting for the opportunity to help, the God whose shoulder is built to cry upon, the God whose mighty arm is waiting to uplift and save, the God who is busy always pouring out blessings and grace. If we will just open our lives to them. So in our time together this morning and even during this series, I hope you'll be here each and every Sunday of the series. I invite us to be brave in our honesty with God. I pray that we will be a people who are willing to talk about hard things, admit our hidden selves to God. We don't come here because we have it all figured out. I don't. And I bet you don't either. We come here because we need God. We come here because we need a community where we can be honest, not perfect. So friends, let's talk about pride and humility. But before we begin, let's pray. Holy God, we come to lay our lives before your holy scripture, that we may find the grace that lies waiting there. Today we admit we are people in need of your grace. Help us open our lives to your work. And all God's people said. First and Second Chronicles. How many of you read that this morning? Anyone? It's just not the book of the Bible that we often quote from, that we often read, that we often talk about. But these two books, they outline the narrative of the first human Adam through the history of ancient Judah and Israel, all the way to about 540 BC with King Cyrus. And while this isn't the place where we often spend our time, I'm off. Hold on. Interesting. Good. And while this book isn't the place where we often spend our time, we're missing out on some important stuff. Take the truth that comes from King Uzziah. By the time he came to power, the people of Israel had split into two kingdoms for a long time, Israel and Judah, and the people of Judah put Uzziah in power in succession of his dad. Now, he was just a boy of 16 years old at the time. But his reign, it started off with a bang. He rebuilt and restored what his father had broken. He spread the territory of Judah with military prowess. He made agricultural life. He even engineered, for all the engineers in the congregation, he engineered some simple machines to protect Judah. He knew such prosperity, meaning the ability to push forward in goodness, because it says he sought, he searched for, he looked to the guidance of God. In other words, he was humble enough to ask for help, to learn, to be corrected, to accept that he couldn't do it on his own, to understand that God was God and he was not. And as he humbly walked in the guidance of God, he was able to push forward in the goodness of God's gift. Until. Every story has its untils. Our stories have their untils. In the 16th chapter, it says, until he grew strong and proud to his destruction. It's an age-old story. We begin to believe in our own strength, forgetting and ignoring our weakness. You can find in Edinburgh, Scotland, a castle tower of seemingly insurmountable strength, but that castle was actually captured once. The fortress had an obvious weakness, so they would defend that with guards, but this other spot was protected by its steepness, its impregnability. No sentries were posted there. And then, at an opportune time, an attacking army sent a small contingency up the unguarded slope and surprised the garrison into surrender. Where the castle was strong, there it was weak. We see it on the daily news. Someone notable whose success and power led them to believe in their own strength, that they could do what they wanted, even outside the law, and then comes their destruction. It's taught about in Greek mythology. It's taught about by Buddha. It's taught by the Dalai Lama. It is a broad and timeless truth. It's the moment when we pretend that all the goodness and success, the gifts that we have our own doing. Never mind the circumstances we didn't make. Never mind the teaching and helping community that made it possible. Never mind that God is the one who gave us our gifts. And once we convincingly pretend we are our own God, we cut ourselves off from the help of God. And so it was with King Uzziah. So bold and so proud, he committed what they call a sacrilege. He walked right through the outer portion of God's temple, all the way back to the holy altar of incense, a place sanctioned by God in the book of Exodus for only priests, dedicated to the holiness of God. There, the priests were instructed to use a special kind of holder and mix a special kind of incense and burn it in honor of the prayers of the people of God. Like prayers floating up to God, so would the incense. Uzziah decided that he no longer needed to follow the ways of God, that he no longer needed the help of the priests, that he knew the intimacy of prayer. He pretended and forged ahead. And to be frank, I don't think he went in to honor God with prayers. I think he went to find out what he could get from God through prayers. So this group of priests come into the temple, chasing Uzziah, trying to uphold the sanctity of the temple and save the king from himself. Making offerings to God is not for you, but for the priests who are consecrated. Go out of the temple, they instructed. For your display of pride will bring you no honor before God. Because, friends, pride has a way of pretending we don't make mistakes. Pride has a way of pretending we know better. Pride won't take instruction. Pride won't allow for I don't knows, and pride won't say I'm sorry. Pride pretends. It won't show weakness because it doesn't want to lose the respect of others. And so as they instructed him, King Uzziah's pride rose. You know, like when you cut somebody off in traffic and they honk and you're mad at them. His pride rose at their instruction and it was unleashed in anger. So the story goes, at that moment his forehead is broken out in a leprous disease, showing once again that he's only human, that he is mistaken, that he is weak and in need like everyone else, because a leper, as long as he has the disease, is considered unclean back then, physically and spiritually. And the laws require that he live alone, that he live outside the camp, and so essentially in this moment he is dethroned. He begins to work through his son, who leads Judah. Friends, our pride pretends. Throughout history and our history. So here's the question of the day. Part 1. If you get real honest in this quiet moment, where do you find your pride pretending in your life? What weakness, what need, what mistakes, what imperfections are you unwilling to admit to somebody else, to yourself, to your God? Where do you pretend that your strength is enough? And in that moment, you don't need God, for there are the places that our pride lies. And you know the result of those prides because we all live it. Distant relationships, the loneliness and that isolation, the lying that is necessary to keep up the charade. No, really, I'm fine. I don't need any help. The exhaustion of always trying to be enough and have enough and do enough, and we never reach enough, and of course, always needing more pretending to keep ourselves in the respect and the good eyes and in the glory of others. But friends, as people of faith, we aren't seeking the glory of others. We're seeking the glory of God. Andrew Murray puts it, faith seeks the glory that comes from God. And as long as we get our glory from others, as long as we seek and love and jealously guard the honor and reputation that comes from humans, we will never fully trust God. We'll never fully know God's peace and joy and communion and purpose. You see, listen closely. Humility is simply the disposition which prepares our soul to live on trust. Trust in God. I once worked with a family of 5, a mom and dad and 3 young children. 2 children had significant physical and cognitive challenges requiring a great deal of medical care and therapy. And the third was always acting out, trying to figure out where she fit in. Mother was diagnosed with cancer and 3 months later had died. The dad had been wounded by church long ago, and in that moment he gave up altogether on God, and he was left. Left as the sole breadwinner, left as the sole provider for kids with intensive special needs. And while he tried to pretend, as their family always had, never admitting the hardship, never admitting the chaos, never admitting the financial desperation of the medical care and therapy, he tried to forge on, but he realized he couldn't do it. Not without his partner. And so in that moment, all the pretending stopped. And he ate his slice of humble pie, saying things like, I can't do this alone. I need help. I don't know how to parent alone. I'm really angry and I'm really bitter. And in the humility of need, he let the work of God in. He started accepting prayer and help and love and resources and training and referrals, and in the mess of their house, in the mess of their lives, in the mess of their finances, in the mess of their uncontrollable grief, humility opened the door wide open to the grace of God. And that grace has been and is sufficient for still moving that healing family forward today. Today, in your seats this morning, you are invited to pursue humility with God. Now, I want to be clear about something. I don't know what you've learned about humility, but I always heard it described as kind of low self-esteem or becoming a doormat of submissiveness. Now, you'll notice that God made it really hard to pat your own back. God also made it hard to kick your own rear end. Healthy pride isn't self-congratulations. And healthy humility isn't busy kicking yourself down. Humility is simply this: admission, surrender, confession of the truth of our imperfection and our need, especially our need for God. It starts with God. God's command is clear. He says, humble yourself. That doesn't mean that it's your work to conquer your own pride. Does anyone ever try a New Year's resolution that doesn't work? Then you already know that conquer your own pride is probably not going to work. Growing humility is not your work, it's God's work. It's God who lifts us up and makes us to be more like Christ. But what this command does mean for you and I, to every opportunity we get to humble ourselves before God, in the faith and the grace that's already working in us, in faith that God is going to offer us more grace to lift you and guide you and offer you more hope, more peace, more joy. Friends, here is the crux of the matter. Humility opens the door to the work of God in your life. So the last question: how will you pursue a growing humility with God? How will you do it? I don't know about what your answer is, but I'll tell you mine. It's to stop pretending. To stand before God and admit that we need Him. We need His power and His perfect guidance and His forgiveness. So here is your challenge this week. I challenge you. I double dog dare you. I challenge you to, even if you are able to get down on your knees and pray a form of this ancient prayer. Have mercy on me, a sinner, O God. Why that prayer? from Luke. Because when we pray it, we're admitting we're imperfect. We don't have it together. We do need you, God. Have mercy on me, a sinner, O God. And then we claim his gifts. For your grace finds me and saves me over and over. Pray it with me. Have mercy on me, sinner, O God. For your grace finds me and saves you. I invite you to whip out a cell phone, take a picture of that, or write it down. I challenge you for 30 days straight with great intention, even down on your knees, to pray, have mercy on me, a sinner, O God, for your grace finds me and saves me. And watch what happens, because when we act persistently and repeatedly, it creates a habit. And a habit creates a disposition. And when we cast ourselves upon God this way, God does what God will always do, ever so slowly. God will begin to change us. He will begin to humble our prideful, pretending hearts, filling the open places with grace, amazing grace that finds us and saves us. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Is it my turn? Okay. A couple Mondays ago, the staff, we'd been down in Nashville, Indiana, and we'd been on retreat, and we'd been working on vision and mission and talking about gifts and roles, and we worked really hard, and we ate really well. And then we drove into the parking lot on a Monday evening. Maybe you're here on a Monday evening, or you've driven through, or there are other groups, but the parking lot was full there, and the parking lot was full back there, and I had to remember what was going on. And then when you came in this building, you saw a posse of Boy Scouts taking their oath. You heard the oath ringing through the hallways, the oath to become the men who God made them to be. And then I got back to the office building, and there was an AA group meeting, and through the closed doors, you could hear the repeat of the steps. Trust in a higher power, making amends. The words that allow folks to reclaim the power of God humbly in their lives and find redemption, to become who God had made them to be. Both buildings filled, both oaths ringing out, and lives being changed. I share that with you because I want you to know, we talk about these buildings like they're just buildings. These are gathering places for community to grow and change and become whole. The only way that's possible is when you say to God, I will give you my tithes, my offerings, my gifts as part of my faith, and you will use that money through the ministries. The church is just a vessel to do your world healing work. So today, again, I stand before you and I say, thank you. Thank you for being faithful. Thank you for taking part of the world-changing, life-changing ministry of Jesus Christ in this place. Would the ushers wait upon us as we offer our best to the God who loves us most?